we're here. This is a special podcast. Our guest today is Jesse Law, Clark County Republican Party Chairman, and my special guest host is Stephanie Phillips. First, I'd like to thank Jesse Law for coming and participating on this program. We also invited the state party chairman, Michael McDonald, but he got caught up, conflict in his schedule. And we're going to talk about the primary race for Nevada governor and United States Senate on the GOP side. And there are many unanswered questions, and many people are confused as to why Joe Lombardo and Adam Laxalt became the GOP nominee for the general election against Steve Sisolak and Catherine Cortez Masto. My first question.
Right to it, he says.
Right to it.
No rants today. Usually there's,
I know, I was going to say.
Rants and
it's good. He knows I have a schedule, so we're doing this thing right.
Jesse has to be out.
My question though, do you guys always have the stress things, or is this to prevent you from hitting me? That's what I.
No. These are standard issues.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. Okay.
Every podcast has these.
Yes, every podcast has it. What kind of made this interview come to fruition is that Veterans of Politics put out a article a couple days ago called "The Silent Minority," and after that article was released, we received several contacts on how different Republicans feel about this race. And one of the questions as to a lot of people want to know what happened. I know you're not part of the state party; you're part of the county party, right?
Well, I can do some clarification. I'll clarify that when you finish your questions, because part of my approach is, and that's actually more to do with a personal growth thing. Because this stuff can get under my skin, like any of these politics. Not getting my way, for instance, gets under my skin. The thing, though,
he's honest.
The thing is that, generally speaking, if I'm reacting to something or feeling that conflict or that anger, frustration, disappointment, I'm not learning anything. Right. And I really like to jump right into reality without the response to it. It's a really hard skill for me to maintain. So getting real with you is about as important to me as it gets.
And I just want to say that I respect both Michael McDonald, the state party chairman, and Jesse Law, the county party chairman. I've known these two gentlemen for lots of years, and this is the second time I'm confused with the election process in the primary. The first time I was confused is when Brian Sandoval went up against Jim Gibbons, who was our governor, and left the federal bench, which was a lifetime position, to go run for governor.
Sure.
And Brian Sandoval was appointed to the federal bench by none other than, nominated to the federal bench and was appointed by the president by none other than Harry Reid.
Yeah,
who was our Democratic senator. And at the same time, Brian Sandoval was running for governor. Rory Reid was running on the Democratic side, Harry Reid's son. And Brian Sandoval ousted out Jim Gibbons, who was a conservative, a real conservative, and brought in, so we had Brian Sandoval. And at this time, folks, Republicans had the Senate and they had the Assembly, and they managed to vote for the largest tax increase Nevada ever had.
Yep.
And in my humble opinion, when I saw all this taking place, and it looks like history's repeating itself again, I honestly think that there is a third party well, you know, we have the Republican, Democrat, Independent American, Libertarians, and I think there's another party out there. I shouldn't say third party. Another party out there called the Establishment Party that's made up of Republicans and Democrats. And I think they sit at a table and say, okay, we're going to put our Democrats in this election, and next election we put in some Republicans. And I think there's some type of private meeting behind the scenes. And the reason why I say that, Jesse, is Joe Lombardo, who is our GOP nominee for governor, gave thousands of dollars to Steve Sisolak, who is currently our governor, and Joe Lombardo is running against Steve Sisolak right now. But when Steve Sisolak was running for governor, he gave him 5, 10, 15, almost $27,000 on here in different ways between his Donald Lombardo, Carolyn Lombardo, Lombardo for sheriff, Joseph Lombardo. And Adam Laxalt was running against Steve Sisolak in the last election. So Joe Lombardo worked against Adam Laxalt to help get Steve Sisolak into the governor's office. And it just doesn't make sense to me. With this one, how would you explain this?
Well, it's not the first time I've seen this stuff.
And now, before you say something, Adam Laxalt and Joe Lombardo, now they're on the campaign trail together, holding hands. It just doesn't make sense, folks. Go ahead, Jesse.
Well, I mean, I can't think of a reasonable scenario where I'm allowed to answer for, somebody else and their behavior. I can tell you that I'm uncomfortable with it. That's not a BS thing to say. Mm-hmm. And I can say, well, maybe what I've heard about it is it was just a different time and they were friends. But I'll tell you something, though. I'm going to be a little arrogant right now.
Okay.
I red pilled back in 2006. I was an idiot listening to Alex Jones. And that doesn't mean that I was an idiot because I listened to Alex Jones. I was both an idiot who also listened to Alex Jones. Way back then. I was a kid. And, you eventually grow up and stop listening to Alex Jones and you go deeper like David Icke or something. I'm just kidding. And I really did change my life. My daughter was in her mom's belly. I've told the story a little bit before about it. And it was just a patriotic thing, a commitment. And as a libertarian, small L, going into the Republican Party, talking about Ron Paul, getting mad at anybody that didn't agree with me because it was coming. And then sure enough, 12 years later, we had this COVID crisis and shutdown. I could also take the tactic that everyone should have woken up with me back in 2006, 7, and 8. And they didn't. Joe Lombardo did see what happened with Steve Sisolak under his one-party rule. Frankly, and this is not bullshit, Steve Sisolak governed differently in the commission. He was considered blue dog. I remember there was a time when there were Republicans for Sisolak against Sandoval. That's how much we didn't like Sandoval. And I never knew the character of Steve Sisolak. I heard from people who I respect and paid attention to him that he's always been a weasel. And he becomes governor and then he's a weasel. And I can't speak for a guy like Joe Lombardo who had to serve. He had to get his men and women, funding and Metro. It was his job. Has a relationship with the head of the commission. I don't know how many friends I can say in politics haven't betrayed me, okay? And there's at least another scenario where Joe Lombardo was betrayed by Sisolak the same way Sisolak betrayed the state of Nevada. Became a different human being from what we saw serving on the commission. That's factual. As a party guy, yeah, I don't like that there's any support of a cross party or whatever. But I'm not going to be able to answer for what that is. And I will say that each of my answers are probably going to be punctuated this way. We ended the primary weeks ago decisively. And I'm interested in defeating Sisolak. And I happen to like Joe Lombardo as a human being. And I think he's going to be a good leader. But also, he's my champion in that race to defeat him. It's not like I get to be choosy and say I'd rather have Bugs Bunny. Bunny ain't on the ballot. And if David Icke was on the ballot, or Alex Jones, I'm just kidding. But no, I don't have anything, I've never asked the man about that. I really don't know him super intimately. But the thing is, you've had exposure to a lot of folks in Clark County, elected and otherwise, but let's just go with those elected folks who have to wear a uniform, who have to defend our streets. Frankly, if you're sheriff, you're king of a county. And everybody who understands constitutional sheriffs and all that knows very clearly what a sheriff's abilities can be. Well, in this case, we got a populous county that's basically a suburb of LA. It can be dangerous here. They have, anti-terrorism task force. It's dangerous. If I was sheriff, I'd be looking over my shoulder at all times when I'm in public, frankly, which means every interaction as sheriff, you have to be on guard. Might stand to reason that the man doesn't come off as warm if he's sizing up for his own personal safety as a matter of his job. So I can't qualify what I've heard from others. Well, I couldn't meet him well and get a good response. Yeah, he's also looking over his shoulder and he's used to that. It's his job. But I had an interesting interaction with him. Didn't know him. He was told that me as county chair, that he could at least get to know me, that I could be friendly with him. And the first time I ever spoke to him was he was with his guys at the front of the Martin Luther King Day parade. It was happenstance that I saw him and I thought, I haven't seen him or spoken to him yet. Probably the polite thing to do would be to introduce myself. And normally, I don't really go out of my way to really meet all that many people who are running as politicians or even as officials. But anyway, it was a chance to meet him. And uniquely, I got a ton of warmth out of the man. And I only think it was because he was able to drop that having to be on the defensive as a sheriff. And to me, being able to see the contrast in it, I view the man that if people want to really criticize him, it's out of a misunderstanding. That doesn't mean I think he walks on water. It does mean that between now and November, I'm going to have a Lombardo tattoo on my forehead because the priority is to beat the Democrat. But the man that I've gotten to know that way, limited, I actually respect quite a bit.
Couldn't he have found a friend in Adam Laxalt when Adam Laxalt was running for governor against Sisolak instead of giving $20-something thousand? I could understand give $1,000 here, but the man gave him $20-something thousand, and he circumvented the system because you could only give $5,000 in the primary and $5,000 in the general. He used his own sheriff campaign to do it. He used his wife to do it. What do you got to say to that? I mean, that's a lot of money.
I think it's irrelevant what I have to say to that, first of all, because we are past the primary. Mm-hmm. These are issues that were improperly litigated prior to the primary. Because had they been properly litigated to your satisfaction and others that were opponents, maybe it'd have been a different result. Mm-hmm. Past the primary doesn't even matter. And it does not matter what I think. I've already stated, though, I do have a preference that we stick with the party. I'm a Republican chair. Prior to that, I was a Republican. Prior to that, I was working with the President of the United States as a Republican. Prior to that, on and on and on. I am through and true. I don't prefer that happened. Mm-hmm. Also, I have nothing to say about it. Like, what am I supposed to say that even is relevant? I'm not aware.
Stephanie?
You say that we've been through the primaries. It was resoundingly for Lombardo, but there's lawsuits that have been filed with a lot of video, photograph evidence of shenanigans that happened in the primary election. So with all of that hanging out there, there's a lot of questions that are unanswered, and a lot of folks don't believe that he was duly elected. So a lot of people will believe there was shenanigans in the 2020 election, but then because their guy won in the primary, there's no evidence. All of that is nonsense. All the stuff that Joey's bringing forward, that didn't happen. And there's a lot of naysayers, but they're not giving that a chance to get through the court system to be presented. So what is your opinion of that? What do you think the party's response should be on that? And because there's a lot out there and it's all going to come out soon.
I can't wait for it to come out. I'm actually quite conflicted with how to address it because I'm quite empathetic to the urgency that these folks, many of them are my friends, some are not so friendly, but my experience in 2020 was a very serious one for me that continues to be very serious. That experience was special because, somehow through inspiration, which I only credit for prayer, we were able to come up with 122,000 anomalies. We were able to get people to go door to door and sign their own witness statement, different than an affidavit. You'd have to have the person at that home sign. But these were hundreds and hundreds of people spending hundreds of man hours, so tens of thousands of man hours of our neighbors and people even from out of state who came here to help, who went door to door to say who lives at this house that voted with this name. Oh, no one? And we sent them out with that to go verify it. Those witness statements were only admitted in court because they supplemented the data work that we did to show, do you see this data set that shows these people told the post office, for instance, that they moved out of state? And do you see this witness statement saying that they went to that door? And we were able to also have whistleblowers from the post office who then later lost their job. They weren't allowed to testify because the federal government lawyers prevented that. Their testimony would have revealed that the postmaster in Henderson directed mail carriers to pick up pieces of mail from people who were deceased knowingly, deceased to the mail carrier, knowingly had moved away to the mail carrier, which actually goes against protocol for election mail, as an example. The 4 weeks or so after the election was like a twilight zone for me personally, and I can say for others. Huge personal and spiritual upheavals as a result of going through something where we thought we were out on a limb, and we were. Very unique experience. And that has caused me to have a rather high threshold that whenever something doesn't go someone's way, they don't just cry fraud. That might be a very direct and rude statement for me to say, but that is the lens I will look through to make sure people aren't just whining. Now, I use the word whining on Facebook toward a friend of mine. He took it rather personal. Others think that that's disrespectful, but the point of using deliberate, direct, or even offensive language is to get us to shake out of what we want so we can look at things how they are. Videos of problems are not the same thing as evidence of vote switching. Do I know that our election system operates in bad faith with these officials? My experience says yes. Does that equate to having proof of fraud in an election in the case of Joey? I would like to see that that is the case. Thus far, it does not meet my standard, and I consider myself an expert on it. That doesn't mean that I think that he shouldn't pursue his legal avenues and that he shouldn't pursue what would be cleaning up an election system that has failed us.
You were intimately involved, it sounds like, in the 2020 election.
I was a director for Trump,
evidence,
yes.
Yeah, all of those things. But are you as intimately involved with Joey's campaign to review the evidence they have collected to make the opinion that you have?
I've only seen what's been out there. They've not come to me and proven anything, right. But I've seen things that have been out there and they do not meet the standards that I hold. I know that there is some statistical analysis that exists. I'm aware of that, but it was actually statistical analysis of the previous election and then being cross-applied to this one, which means it is not sufficient. It's not the same. It's a different election year. I actually do welcome literally all of it coming my way.
Yeah.
But it does not make me a bad guy to say that it must be proven to me, because I have a very high standard and I know what we did with hundreds of man hours. Mm-hmm. I know what we did. I know we did with a whole legal process. And I'm also aware of plenty of the integrity violation for the election reports that were already submitted that do not meet that threshold. Why? Because that was part of the primary process. Some of those reports were given. And if they're also being used, what they show is a bad faith effort on the part of election officials, in my opinion. That's different than saying that the votes were flipped or specifically thrown away and that it is a number great enough to overcome. The thing that I'm disappointed about, frankly, is how great Joey did in getting that percentage that he did. I'm a grassroots guy. I have a preference for grassroots connected candidates and officials. I think that that's what's wrong with most of our officials, certainly on our side of the aisle, but both sides, that there's no connection to the base. The fact that he could get to that number, we should be swinging from the rafters in celebration that he did that well and that we could build off of that. The cynicism, resentment, and then hatred of even a guy like me who had nothing to do with any of it, whose job it is to lead us toward victory, toward the real enemy, the Democrats, not each other. And I'm resented or something, it shows that the priority is being placed on victimhood. It's not fair. I'm not getting my way. And I want, for my actions, I got a physical reaction out of that, hopefully. I want my actions and my leadership to reorient us to what the priority is, because it was the one-party rule system nationwide who did these terrible COVID policies, shutting down all of our businesses and everything else. My children are moving out of state, and it is in their best interest. And they're doing that because our school system failed us during COVID. There's no good services. These are real life consequences. It is real to me, just like it's real to anyone who would be listening, any business owner, any family member. It's real that we have to defeat the Democrats.
It's a tough pill to swallow for some people, though, when you tell them, get over it, move on, the evidence, we don't see anything, and just put it under the rug. A lot of people have said about the 2020 election. People are saying that about the Nevada primaries. And without all of this being presented and everybody seeing this, everyone has seen bits and pieces and heard this and this and this, but no one has seen the complete package of what they have. So for a party to just poo-poo that and say, there's nothing there. He's just doing it because, he's a sore loser or whatever it is that people say. It's hard for people to acknowledge that and move on without fixing the election process, because we know that there's all kinds of stuff that goes on.
Part of my attitude, and I do get one, it does also exist because I'm conflicted and in agreement with you. I have that agreement too. Part of the reason why I get an attitude is because other people shoot first, their own allies.
Yeah, I get
and
it.
it's like, whoa, okay, if that's what it's going to be, all right, let's go ahead and get an attitude back.
Yeah.
And like, for instance, the post that is caused a stir, because I don't normally engage in a negative discourse. Like, it makes me feel bad. So like, I don't want that. I posted about Seagal and somebody was lighting up Seagal and she wasn't doing enough. And I'm like, all right, you mother effers. And so I understand. And it's a human response from me. And I hear you loud and clear. People need to have justice on this matter. But taking all of the information in a totality, I went through it. I had a Supreme Court in our state that I will say didn't review all of that blood, sweat, and tears. Didn't. Mm-hmm. And it was a slap. So if I think that there's a threshold that we met that is not currently being met, the end result is going to be that we have to fix this under a new Secretary of State and Attorney General and Governor and legislative body. That is the net effect. So if we want to live in reality, there's the reality of the people who have to, Joey and his team, who have to redress their grievance. I support anyone's right to do it. I do not support the denigration of the guy who is the official winner. Those are two separate issues. And if people want to mix them like they're the same, well, I've got a problem with that. but the reality of their ability to redress versus the reality of what they will be. And that is unsuccessful in our legal system. Unsuccessful. That's tough. That sucks.
Yeah.
Well, sure.
So far.
But like, you know what I'd do? Bet everything I got. And I'm not even saying those things as a qualification of what's real or not real or true or not true. I'm talking about what our system is, and it is broken.
It is broken. I mean, in the 2018 election for governor, there's an article from Nevada Victory. Steve Sisolak is bragging how Joe Lombardo raised a ton of money for him. And I'm not making any of this stuff up. You got President Trump, former President Trump, who endorsed Joe Lombardo. I don't know why, because there's an article out that says Lombardo said he recognized Biden as the duly elected president. And then President Trump endorses this guy.
See, with all due respect,
it just doesn't make sense to me.
To just bash the nominee of the party after the primary, to me, does not serve a positive purpose. These are legitimate questions.
I'm not bashing because I'm not making anything up. I am pointing out different instances that has taken place. A lot of Republicans told me they're not going to vote for a governor, a GOP governor. They're not going to vote for a GOP senator. They're going to skip over that race. Some even tell me they're going to vote for the Libertarian candidate. So I decided maybe we need to clear this up to get people on the track and to find out what's going on and why these things really happen.
I think that the only way to actually do that is if people will prioritize what's most important, which is defeating the Democrats. And I mean that. So I can say, like, we can litigate each of these issues, and I might actually have a decent response to these. Mm-hmm. As I think about how I would respond, I also think about whether or not it's relevant. Mm-hmm. I don't know that it's relevant after a primary. Now, if this is a show for a kumbaya, I will be far from effective if I don't remind us that my damn kids are moving to Utah because of the Democrats, all right? Mm-hmm. Or people's children aren't reading. Or they shut down our businesses. We're the second highest tax or gases in the country. Our unemployment. Like, these are consequences of the Democrats. So we can do that, but I have to tell you, I'm not aware that it serves the purpose for defeating the Democrats, which is more important to me. In terms of whether or not somebody supported a Democrat, I think that we've already covered my position on it. So if you bring it up again, I will just say we've covered this. But Trump did the same thing. And frankly, for all I know, Lombardo was as surprised as anybody else that Sisolak turned out to be a piece of shit. Quote me. In terms of our president endorsing him, I've said it once and I'll say it 1,000 times again. And by the way, let me just say, everyone thinks I had a preference in the primary. Everyone does. What I had a preference for was living in a place of reality on what is happening and to not live anywhere else with my own personal preference. That's no BS. And so for me, I just wanted to size things up as they were. And I had a fear of a Joey losing because I thought Joey would be a disruptive loser. And I care about beating the Democrats. That made me think that his character wasn't proper, because if we don't properly prioritize defeating the Democrats, then all we're doing is defeating ourselves.
Before or after the primary?
I believed that he would be a sore loser prior to the primary. That was what I believed.
So you thought his character was flawed after the primary?
I thought his character was
because
flawed
he's contesting
prior.
the election.
No, I thought his character was flawed prior, because there was not going to be a scenario in which he did not try to contest or make it about him instead of defeating the Democrats. And unfortunately, That doesn't mean I like that I have that opinion. I have a preference that we get the most grassroots and constitutional person there is. Also, we have to win. We also have to beat the Democrats. And if we're going to defeat ourselves, and I thought Joey was going to be a part of that. Turns out that was correct. And I think that's a character flaw on his part.
There's a couple reasons why I decided to do this show.
Sure.
I don't want a Brian Sandoval again.
Neither do I.
And that's what we had.
Correct.
And I stayed silent when Sandoval did his thing. And then he gave us the largest tax increase Nevada ever had. Mm-hmm. I'd rather go with somebody that I know is going to happen than somebody that I got to flip a coin, because I thought Sandoval was conservative. Found out he's not. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the same thing happening here. I mean, you got a guy that's been endorsed by the president, and the president has been contesting this election forever, ever since it came out.
The 2022 primary
Right.
is not the same as the 2020 general election.
And then you have the same guy that's being endorsed by the former president says that Biden is the duly elected president of the United States.
There are a lot of elected
In his
officials
own
who've done
words.
that. I can't pick on Joe Lombardo in a vacuum, because that is not an uncommon statement for a lot of Republicans. And look,
It's uncommon for the folks that Trump endorses, because Trump likes nothing. I mean, he does not like anyone who says they saw no evidence of voter fraud in the 2020 election. Period.
fine, but I don't know
End of
what the
story.
point of this part of we can talk about Trump endorsing. You're never going to get me to know all of his thought process on little instances. There were contradictions for him to go for Joe Lombardo over, say, fill in the blank, somebody else that just seems like a more pro-Trump, individual. But let's put ourselves in Trump's shoes. He wants to win in Nevada. He wants to win in Pennsylvania. He wants to win in Arizona. Those are his policies. And in the state of Nevada, the polls he was provided, which were the official polls, he can choose to agree with them, and in this case he did. We can choose to say they were insufficient polls. Doesn't matter. We're not Trump. Trump was given this information. He was also shown that he had the most expertise on an official scale. That's a fact that I could even argue as well. But that's what he was shown. He was shown that he had the most money, both in his campaign and outside his campaign. And that was from the start. And it never deviated. Never once. It all the way and until the endorsement, there was no deviation. It was everyone else's opportunity to seize a moment. What I wanted out of that dang primary was the champion. And had any of the other candidates risen, Trump would have seen it. And I just don't think we set him up for the kind of success to pick like a grassroots person or something if any of those other candidates did not seize it. And we can say, well, the polls are bad. Well, the polls matched the result. And I know that people want to say, well, the results are bad. Okay, but we have to prove that. And I already know what the turnout is going to be on the proof. And I'm disappointed about our election system. It does not feel good to be saying things that I'm saying. But I also have to live in this. And I don't want to litigate about Joe because he's the winner. And I got to beat those damn Democrats.
A lot of people say that Joe is just another Democrat. They say that he's all because of his policies and things that he's done and said, he's flip-flopped on many things. So a lot of people think that he's just going to be another, he's like Sisolak 2.0.
Here's where I totally relate to a sentiment. But I had to get to peace also. I'm a Ron Paul guy. I didn't change that. Damn it. But like I said, is it relevant? Is it relevant what I think is irrelevant? When I think of Joe Lombardo as whether or not he's the right kind of Republican in the opinion of all these people, when I think about those people being scared or angry or any of these, those responses indicate to me how urgent it is to have our 2020 election stolen, to have our economy shut down. We don't even have things on the shelves. This ain't America. And it's urgent as hell They're passionate, they're fearful, they don't know what to do. We're all out of control spinning on this little top, right? So therefore, their fear intercedes into what they think. And when they size up a man that they don't know in Sheriff Lombardo, their fear also is part of how they look at him. And in a worst case scenario, we can just say everything bad we want. In a worst case scenario, if I'm afraid, I can say all these things. Factually speaking, none of these people know the man. Factually speaking, when people say some of the disgusting accusations against him that I hear, it makes me angry.
I'm only going off of facts.
I get
not
it.
just like here's what people say, their opinions of him. This is stuff that, I mean, we did a whole podcast on him. We've asked him to come here twice. He canceled.
Sure.
And I had a lot of things to ask, and these things are valid things. These are things that he flip-flopped on.
Sure.
So this isn't just someone saying,
I get it.
oh, I just don't like the guy because, But he didn't
there's
campaign.
another.
He didn't get in with the people. He didn't campaign. He wasn't there. He was like, they call him No-Show Joe. He didn't
disagree.
relate to people.
I agree with that. I do disagree though on his campaigning. Here's how I have to size the man up, who I've just met a few times. First of all, I have to remember he's human, number one. And if I put too much of an attitude into what I think he's doing, I forget that element, which is a real one. As a libertarian, I have the benefit and curse of looking at all the people who've ever been elected as having a different way of thinking about government than I do. I like individual freedom quite a bit. The dangers of a slippery slope of a state solution is very real to me. And now apparently real to everyone else, given what we've been through. So much so that we're getting Hispanics to come over, union members to come over, and because the spell is wearing off. Everyone's getting that red pill. So when I look at the things that I'm aware of the criticism, I don't live in a vacuum. Other than the man won, and he's my champion for November. I'm like, well, here's a man who worked in a civil servant environment. He doesn't think politically about vaccines. Doesn't. He wasn't red-pilled on the issue because he was too busy trying to prevent Clark County from turning into the next Rodeo Drive break, smash, and grab, and all of the things that have gone on just 5 hours away. And it got hairy quite a few times here. And it's not been good. The housing prices, the problems in the economic situation for families, the criminal element is creeping over. And he's been focused on that. And so then I'm like, well, he should have thought just like me on the vaccine. You think I'm going to take that thing? No.
What is the Republican Party's stance on the vaccine?
Well, I'm not aware that there is one. I'll tell you my stance. No chance in hell. It's my body, and I'm not going to let them experiment on me or my children, and I would die first.
Then why do you have, well, not you.
Yeah, I was going to say,
not
hold
you.
on, I got to grab this or I'm going to start swinging.
Correction. You
You
got,
want this, Jesse?
Yes. Oh, God. Here we go.
you got Joe Lombardo in a Review Journal saying that he's for vaccines for new hires.
Which he mandated, which is not a very Republican thing to do.
You know, my personal opinion of it is not favorable. Also, I do take a position that it's not really relevant what I think about it when he's won. At the time, I'm thinking, here's a man that is a civil servant who isn't thinking of it in the orientation of government, individual versus state, that I have. And so that it would be a new concept for him. So for me to judge him and say I disagree on something that's urgent for me is a valid point. But for me to judge him as therefore being bad is completely incorrect. I think that the worst tragedy, and I'm using that word very deliberately, is that we've had, especially because Sandoval did this chasm between our elected officials and our base for so long. And here I am thinking, if there's anything I can do to contribute, it would be to bring some reality and close that distance between our elected officials and our base. Because if they don't have a connection to us, our opinions aren't real to them. They're just going to go to whatever makes the most sense in their decision making as legislatures. And by the way, they're people who are very well funded to be very convincing, not us. And what did the base and what does the base continue to do? I'm going to say it in a very deliberate way. Shit all over them. And I'm like, I'm offended by it because I think the dude's just a guy. Do I have disagreements on some policies like this that are serious enough to me to say I would never in my life? Yes. How am I supposed to now, and the base, work with a man when his only exposure to our grassroots is that they are that vile toward him? Like I had somebody in this constitutional sheriff's event that was going to go on say, you need to go, Jesse. Everyone needs to know you're constitutional sheriff. I'm like, bitch, I hosted Richard Mack back in 2009. You think I don't know? I do. Well, you need to make Lombardo. These guys don't understand this kind of thinking. It's not relevant to their job in keeping our county safe. It's a political thing that we're trying to introduce to them. That means that they have to be willing to hear it. And we're yelling at them and being vile toward them. They're not going to listen. So when it comes to complicated issues like convincing someone who's been a civil servant their whole career that the state policy on safety is actually super dangerous, he's got to have a willingness to hear that. Which means we have to behave ourselves and at least not denigrate his character in vile ways.
I think, with all due respect, Jesse, I think Joe Lombardo did this to his own character. Nobody had anything to do with it. Back in 2015, he supports tax increases. Isn't the Republican Party against tax increases?
Yeah, I think that's bullshit. Let me tell you why. Right
there. I didn't write it.
No. First of all, I apologize to the audience. I was going to have the Lombardo tattoo done this morning, and I messed up. I'm sorry. No, look, you're in charge of a department, my man. You're getting more money for your cops. I'm not saying I'm okay with more taxes. I'm saying let's just be a little bit more realistic. Do I want less taxes? Yes. Did the man say he won't raise taxes? Yes. He made that as a promise, and I believe him.
Sandoval said the same thing.
I know, and Sandoval's...
the largest tax increase Nevada has ever had was under Republican leadership.
I'm not a fan of Sandoval, and also, I'm not going to call Lombardo Sandoval.
You know what? Back when Sandoval was governor, we controlled the assembly and we controlled the Senate. We could have had voter ID. We could have had school choice. We could have had a whole bunch of stuff. But instead, they call them rhinos. That's exactly what he is. At least with a Democrat, you know what you're getting.
I know, and I'm not going to call Lombardo Sandoval. I'm not. But I am going to make sure that whatever I do, and this is what I've been obsessed with for about a year, that we have a proper seat at the table. Do you know how cool the cool kids are in the lobbying circles? They are cool as shit. I'm talking about, those who lobby for the largest industries in the state are rather convincing when they come to you with their solution. Well, I know it doesn't really align with your values, but we have an urgent situation. And it's rather convincing. Let's talk about like Scott Hammond as a senator. Here's a school choice guy. He's faced rather complicated decision making as a legislature. I'd prefer he'd vote way different for sure. What if he never really had someone backing him up against the cool kids? Having a proper seat at the table reinforces and gives backbone to these legislatures. And it's the same thing with an executive branch. We need to have an appropriate seat at the table. But we will have zero seat at the table if these people feel like the only thing they get out of a base is an embarrassment. What the base must be is contributive toward their election. We must help them get elected. We must help them raise money. Because then they're going to say, oh, this is a relationship now. This isn't just people screaming at me.
Is that why the Trump event at Treasure Island was closed to the public? Because they were worried about the base embarrassing them?
I really don't know. I did something far more enjoyable. I took my son to Estes Park and Rocky Mountain National Park. It was a dream weekend. I don't know. But I will say what I heard about it that made me think was that Trump, who I call President Trump, was on script the whole time. And that tells me that there was a seriousness of the message with how to speak about Nevada on a law and order approach. But let's face it, is that why it was closed to the public? What did some jerks who luckily got a link to go into a closed event do? They shouted him down. And to me, it's despicable because I love that man, Donald Trump. And anyway, so yeah, maybe it was, and maybe it should have been.
They should have capitalized on him coming to Nevada and rallying for them. And those were his endorsements. Those were his people.
Yeah,
and to not allow the base to come in to support that, nobody really knows because they weren't allowed to go. So why, I don't know why
some
their
base
campaigns
snuck
wouldn't
in and
capitalize on that.
These are the most toxic and vile personalities that I've witnessed in quite a while within the base. And I tell them that deliberately to their face. They actually did cause a spectacle there. So was it the right decision to close it based off of these people doing it? Yeah, but I don't know that that was their decision making. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to defend the vileness and that nature of those folks who just are, in my opinion, just literally angry at the world anyway. And now this is their latest thing to talk about an injustice over. And the fact that I don't like people being that nasty to one another puts me at opposite ends. The tragedy in that is I also have the empathy that we have a serious problem to resolve.
Right. So Trump was talking about Las Vegas being a cesspool of crime. And he says that right in front of his endorsed candidate, who is the sheriff of Clark County.
Yeah, in fact, I'm glad you brought that up because Las Vegas hit number 6 as the highest murder rate in the United States as far as cities concerned. Murder went up 49% in the city of Las Vegas under his leadership, and now he wants to run the entire state.
Why was this not properly litigated prior to the primary?
Oh no, this was brought up.
I'm saying this properly,
but I'm so confused, Jesse. I mean, you had a.
So what do you want me to do?
No.
Do you want me to vote like third party?
No.
Like,
I'm trying to. We have a following,
mm-hmm.
and they're confused. Mm-hmm. So instead of me not do nothing and say, hey, you guys just vote however you want to vote, I figured I'd get you on here and talk about this. Stephanie and I could have just sat here and bash him without you. We didn't need you to bash him. In fact, we're not trying to bash him. We're trying to understand what's going on in the noggin on why the Republican Party would choose this guy. He's like a sandpaper. He has no he's not charismatic.
I think he is.
Oh my God, really?
I do. I like the guy. And I'm a Ron Pauler.
Were you hitting the Chiba when you
We can talk about that off air.
There is no way this guy's charismatic. He's like a sandpaper.
He actually is. Look, I said it in a roundabout way. I think when you're king of the county and everyone's trying to kill you, you have a certain attitude in a public setting. I think he's just a guy. In fact, I think he's one of the guys, and I like talking to him when I get to. And you know what? The fact that that's the case, I really value because he, as the guy who was running, learned real quick that hanging out with the county party organization and the base there wasn't really in his best interest, right? So who the hell am I to him? He didn't need anything from me. For him to be any kind of warm at all, I considered pretty cool that I got to see what people don't see. So is the other persona, the sandpaper one? It could be, maybe. And does he need to soften that up? Maybe. I'm not going to deny what's really happening. I just don't want to say that that's him. Now, when it comes to this, we talked about this before the show. I promised I'd put on sunglasses on things that I'm uncomfortable. So, all right. No, I just wanted to look cool for 2 seconds. Is this good? Okay, we're good. All right. In terms of the crime, what I'm happy about is, I remember under Gillespie, the morale in Metro was pretty low.
And it still is.
I think the morale has improved.
By what?
Wow, look, there's just a difference in attitude between Gillespie at year 8 and Lombardo at year 8. Okay, my cousin's I'm so proud of him. He's a lieutenant, just recently passed.
Congrats.
Yeah. And I didn't ask him, but I'm listening to how he talks about things with work, and it's a palpable difference. But anyway, I think that that concern, the way you raise it, also ignores what is happening. And we have a societal crisis. Pick an issue. And it's education, it's economic, it's home prices. I'm not going to put my head in the sand. I had a friend of mine held at gunpoint in her gated community by 2 kids, drugged out, stole her car, threatening to kill her with a gun in her face. She's still shaking today. Did the whole thing where for 2 weeks she doesn't even remember really what she was doing that whole time. Total trauma. And what was neat also was her neighborhood. It's a brand new one. Kind of all came together for her, which is neat because remember, Vegas wasn't always community, and we're getting there. Crime's real. I have those concerns. Number 6, I hate that. I don't like what Carolyn Goodman just had to do down at Fremont Street. This is some real shit.
Set up metal detectors.
This is my city, right? But in a vacuum, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to carry your coat while you scream about how bad it is under his leadership. But with every other factor, we're talking about a societal collapse all over the place. And he's done a great job preventing the smash and grabs and the other things that are going on in other places where it's getting bad. I want more. I don't think he's done something wrong. I don't.
Do you think he's an opportunist because the Las Vegas Sun says he supports Sisolak until he decides to run against them?
Well, that's one characterization you could use, I guess. But what about that red pill phenomenon that I was talking about earlier? What am I supposed to do? Be mad at you that you weren't the proper libertarian I wanted you to be back in 2007 when I first met you? Or fill in the blank anybody? It would have been a lot more convenient.
Who was a libertarian back in 2007?
Me.
Oh.
Like me and 4 other people that also get under your skin. It would have been a lot more convenient if people prior to Trump understood the nature and danger of a statist system that is bloodthirsty. Bob Marley had it right. The Babylon system is the vampire. I love that quote. Sorry, I promised myself I'd get in a weird quote.
Do you judge a man on his word or his behavior?
Well, yeah, behavior is a big deal.
More so than promises?
Well, yeah. But here's the thing. Red pill. I just keep saying it because I think the audience would understand the concept. There's a point where these situations now are new and relevant to you. I believe this wholeheartedly. How did Joe Lombardo operate as sheriff? He operated like a sheriff. He didn't operate like a partisan. He didn't operate with politics. He did not.
Is that why he's against high-capacity magazines and Republicans are for it?
I would like to, again, address that not in a vacuum. Because if I do it in a vacuum, Mr. Libertarian ain't so happy.
And is that why?
But law enforcement officials across the country take that approach. It is not unique to this man. I can't just pick on him. I have to understand
but he's running,
why.
But he's running as a Republican champion for the governor's seat.
Yeah.
And he's against high capacity magazines, which is Republicans are all.
Do you know what Sisolak? Do you know what Sisolak is against? Firearms like an AR-15 that he'll call an assault rifle. Sisolak's policies, dwarf on how urgently dangerous they are.
And you don't think Lombardo's on the same road as Sisolak is in that respect?
I do not.
How about illegal immigration? He stops ICE. He's not sending anybody to ICE. He's not stopping illegal immigration.
I actually don't have information on that to give you an educated opinion. But here's the thing. You know what? I think it would be most valuable to somebody listening to what I have to say about Joe Lombardo my experience with Joe Lombardo that made me turn into somebody who is looking at him with a bit of respect, humanity, and appreciation is that I believe the man is who he is. Why do I say that? The gun issue is like that third rail. And we have the tragedy with a shooting recently. He gets up during the primary and the debate, and the first thing he says is, yeah, we shouldn't have that. No fear of taking an issue on that I fully disagree with. That strikes me as rather apolitical. That strikes me as rather he is who he is. I have an appreciation for that. What I want for our state is somebody who has to take on new decision-making in a political way, and that would be Joe Lombardo's now going to have to take this on in a political way. He has to think that way now. That he at least is who he says he is. He's just a guy. That's why I get frustrated, like having a disagreement with decision-making, but then putting a layer on that makes them somehow like evil or something like this. It's just not accurate. Now I understand because I'm guilty of that. But that lens came from a place of fear and urgency for myself. So I was always fearful and was always urgent.
And it still rings.
Well, maybe you have somebody that can break through the veil on the do not disturb. But that's my point. I actually do think that Joe Lombardo is who he is, which is awesome. Because, the phenomenon that I enjoy probably the most about the Trump appeal was that we were so interested, especially after Romney lost, of rejecting the polite liars, that we picked up a person who, not to me, I don't think he's obnoxious at all, but objectively speaking to people who measure obnoxiousness, would say Donald Trump is up there. And we would rather have that kind of authenticity than a polite liar. And I thought Joe Lombardo willing to take a stance that I fully disagree with on Second Amendment showed that he is who he is. And I think that's something that I'd like to work with. At least it won't leave our voters guessing. Like for instance, if I'm measuring up a man in character and then I'm looking at Sisolak, here's a guy that just did anything he could to gain his power, starting running from assembly, working all his way up to now governor, doing whatever he can to be in that position.
I believe he was regent, county commission, then governor.
Didn't he run for assembly back in like the 90s?
I don't remember.
Well, he did because I told the story, regent. But I didn't know whether or not he was elected. But people that have done business with that man always thought that he had a character problem. And I didn't know any of this. I saw him as a commissioner who wouldn't raise taxes and seemed a little more conservative. And people were like, well, let's draft him against Sandoval because we hate that SOP. And that didn't happen. But it was because everyone believed that the dude was something he portended to be. And we all found out the hard way just how dangerous this man is who just is ambitious. Sisolak is only about that ambitiousness. He acts and behaves exactly like Newsom. And now what? Newsom's going to be the 24 guy for the Democrats, maybe? So what was that deal with Sisolak, right? He'll be his little partner as the neighbor next door at the stake. So as I'm looking at who we have as our champion to beat Sisolak, I'm observing a man that is who he is, even when the base disagrees. I don't like those disagreements.
Do you think that there is another party out there called?
No. I'm kidding.
Knows what I'm
Let you finish.
called the establishment party that's made up of both Democrats and Republican, and they pick and choose what Republican is going to run and what Republican is going to win, and Republican win this election and the Democrat win that election and do some type of trade-off between the two. Because after I found out all this information with Lombardo, I'm starting to think that that's maybe a true statement. That we're not the ones running the show, the voters.
There's an alternate point of view that there is a group of people of influence that look at voter trends and try to manage the outcome from within those voter trends. Yes. Does that mean that they've decided that Republicans will do better in an off-year election? No. the voter behavior is what decides the result. These guys, like any other ambitious group, are trying to sandbag it, where they win in both scenarios. And I do have some very specific information about a group like that.
Do you?
Sure. Back before Brian Sandoval was running, the mayor of North Las Vegas was running. Mayor Mike, he didn't want to hire the wrong consulting firm that also represented Rory Reid. He was told, if you don't do this, we'll find your opponent and we'll shut off your donations because we will be controlling the LVCCA. And he says, well, I'm not going to have you run my opponent's campaign and mine. And next thing you know, they shut off his donations and recruited Brian Sandoval, and that was that. So
there is big time behind the scenes.
100%. But instead of getting too cynical, it's a place I've lived for a long time, or resentful of that problem, Nevada does political business a certain way. And if I understand how that business is done, I need to understand how I can change it. And for me, like, I don't want to live in a place of conflict, because again, to me, if I'm conflicted, I ain't learning. So what I like to do is I like to go, oh, this is my emotional response, throwing chairs and things like that. That's interesting. Set it aside. What's the reality here? And to me, I think that our those who lead politics, not just the officials or the candidates, but those who help guide them, are not really incentivized for values, like for Republican values or conservative values, or problem solving, like they've got a task to accomplish. I think that frankly, what pays their bills and keeps them motivated is the building of their own business. And if they are the ones who induct all of our candidates and officials into the political process where they just orient their thinking around what builds their business, it's no wonder. Like they'll say, do not go to the base because they'll embarrass you. They're right, by the way. I'd like to change that. But also, this is how political business is done. And now we have a group of officials who are shocked when they get booed for a bad vote by the base. What do you mean? I thought I was the Republican. You're not. And understanding that landscape has also taught me where there's a gap in how we can be successful. Understanding that landscape tells me that with an appropriate seat at the table to contribute, we can actually give a backbone to an elected official that would otherwise want to listen to us. But they're faced with political realities where if the loudest voice is also the only voice, and it's raise taxes and no one will defend you from us if you don't, that's a tough decision that they just made in favor of raising taxes because we didn't give them anything to protect them. We won in 14 because it was the second term of Obama. It was the mid-year. I understand why we won in 14 as a red wave. You know what we didn't do? Duplicate it for 16. Why? Because we didn't know what happened in 14 in terms of who changed their vote over. I think the most important thing we could do if we want a Republican machine is know who changed their vote to Republican, why they did it. Because what do we get out of this year in 2022? If we get a red wave in 2022, but we don't know who changed their vote or why they changed their vote, 2024 comes around and what? Nevada's going to be a mysterious loser for the president again? Not on my watch. What I want out of this year in terms of red wave, I want to send these Democrat socialist bastards packing. All right? I'm sick of this one-party rule system from this other group where there is no consequence for their bad behavior. They can run amok doing literally anything they want. And in the 2020 election was a good example. There was bad behavior. We brought it up in court. Ain't nothing happened. Ain't nothing changing, right? We need to give some consequence so that we have normal balance in people's behavior again. And once we get beyond that, what are we doing for 2024? Are we keeping the red wave for 2024? If that's what we want, well, somebody's got to think about doing that. So as people are disheartened, angry, resentful with the results because they didn't have the victory that they were seeking, there's a flip side to it. A, they should be very glad that they did get a huge margin for grassroots. That's a new phenomenon for our state of Nevada. It's a good thing. So build on it. Learn from it. Learn why you didn't get to 26, 7, and 8%, and on and on and on.
But if we don't fix our elections and we don't fix the process and all the shenanigans that go on, we're never going to have a free and fair election. This is required. This is necessary. What they're doing and bringing to the courts, that's necessary.
I don't disagree.
And that's not only necessary for Republicans, for everybody. It's an American problem. It's not a right or left or center or whatever. It's every single person. You want your vote to count. So what they're doing is for the party.
I agree,
And
but what they're doing to promote it in a way that denigrates the other candidate is not for the benefit of fixing the election system. So what I'm faced with in terms of trying to achieve a victory in the fall is a group of people that I naturally agree with their effort to fix it, also helping Sisolak by dividing us. And I don't think they have to. Last I checked, they could just focus on the challenge, which has nothing to do with Joe Lombardo.
Well, see, and the other side of that coin is, we need and have to have our party united. Everybody is, they're doing these unity tours and all of this, and that's great. We need to bring everyone together. But the other side, I hear people saying, is that the other side's creating the division, and you're putting up a candidate that can't possibly win against Sisolak only because these people, they look at the things that he's done, the things that he said, and the things that he's flip-flopped on, and they view him as a Democrat. So they don't want that. They don't want to vote for that. So it's hard to bring those people into the fold and bring them back when you look at just the last few years, since 15 and forward, and the things that he's done. It's really hard. And for him to not get out there and get to the people and get these messages addressed, he won't address these things. And he won't come to the voters and say, or I haven't seen him do that anyway. We asked him twice to come on and he canceled both times. But for him to not come out to the voters and say, look, I said this back in 2016. I said this about high capacity magazines. Here's why I said it. This was the context. Here's how I feel about it now. So that whole other side of the base is, one side sees the other side creating the division. The other side sees the other side. But honestly, we're all on the same team, and we all want the same goal. We all want to defeat the Democrats.
How can they accuse any side of putting Lombardo up? Like, for instance, there are some people who think it was me, and there are plenty of people who come to my defense and don't think it was me, but I'm not 50,000 voters.
Yeah.
The voters voted.
The reason why he got that vote is because of the majority, is because of the Trump endorsement. Why didn't Gilbert get it? I mean, Gilbert says that the election was rigged. He says everything Trump wants to hear. Lombardo's the opposite, and he got it. It just does not make good sense.
What, that Trump would endorse Lombardo as
exactly.
the one who...
Well,
it just doesn't make good sense.
But the party did too. The party had him in, the booklet at that state convention. Yeah, so that was already predetermined, and that was put out by the state, the GOP. So I think some people were probably confused about that, and were, wondering why he was, because obviously the party voted otherwise that day. And also with Laxalt and Sam Brown, they voted different, and endorsed Sam Brown and not Laxalt, like the state was backing Laxalt. So,
Well, I will say that is, they put both candidates on for recommendation for Sam Brown and Laxalt. Right. I stayed away from the nomination committee process. I have a policy, right or wrong, that if people aren't asking my opinion, they don't value it, which means that I don't just interject my opinion to people who will not use it. That's wasted. And I made some inquiries because I said, you guys are facing a rather tough political decision, especially when Michelle Fiore was on as governor candidate. Mm-hmm. I'm like, what are you going to do here? You'll have a bunch of qualified people, and one of them happens to be the national committee woman. This, consequences happen. I disagree fully with what happened at that state convention. And
you disagree with
putting
Lombardo in there
as the only person. Yeah, I thought it was probably the most reckless political decision I've ever seen the party make.
It was.
They've not done that before.
Not like that. No.
Okay.
Well, the thing, everything we do has a cost and a benefit.
Yeah.
And people pick on our state chairman for being a supporter of Joe Lombardo. And I said this the other day. And here's a flip side to look at.
Everybody's entitled to their opinion.
Yeah, but here's the flip side of it.
But you can't force your opinion on people.
I agree. The flip side of that argument, which actually, if you know Michael like I know Michael, you'll know that he has these instincts which are actually really strong. Sometimes to the point where I'm mad at him, right? They're good. They're good instincts. Mad at him like he made something happen. By the way, I don't believe he made Trump endorse. I mean, for the record, I don't. Yeah. But if he was asked his opinion, because I talked to a guy from another state, he'll never see this, from North Carolina, who was asked about an endorsement too, and he said, I took the position. Do I have one about this person over this person? I have it. Am I making a recommendation? No, but this is my opinion. And I know that that would have happened with Michael. But Michael's support of Joe Lombardo that was rather outward is also a demonstration that he understood that Joe Lombardo was going to be successful. And what did he do? He married the governor nominee to the party, at least in some way. And so as much as it could be disagreed with, and we've already discussed that, it also shows a rather shrewd instinct on it. And that's a benefit. And frankly, I worry all the time that Joe Lombardo is not going to care, anything about what the party thinks because we've yelled at him. And he's like, well, who the hell are you people? And I don't think that that's what's going to happen because I'm going to be right there.
That's who we are.
I know, but think about it from a human. I'm not talking about what's right and wrong. I'm not. I'm talking about what is a human incentive. If I'm rude to somebody, they want to listen to me a lot less. And I think that we need to do our job and even be decent as people. This isn't about right and wrong. Let's just be decent, humane as people. And understand that people are allowed to have disagreement. And the folks who are super negative, I understand where that's coming from. There's a fear of him being as bad as the other guy.
Well, do you know when he really turned me off, Joe Lombardo, is when he was on that first time I was seeing him doing any debates because he runs away from everything. And if he's going to run away from everything...
I don't think he runs away from everything.
He ran away from a lot of stuff during this campaign. If he's going to run like that, then is he going to run like that as a governor as well? Is when he was doing that last debate and you had Heller and Lee and Gilbert and Nora, I think that was it, that was there debating. And he goes, well, this election is over. I mean, vote. We didn't even start voting. This election is over.
So he has the most money.
And I have the most money and I'm leading in the polls and that's a sign of arrogance.
Yeah, that wasn't the right thing to say.
That's arrogant.
I have to tell you something.
Arrogant.
Let me start by putting
not
these
confidence, arrogance.
I've been accused of having some arrogance. You can ask some former lovers, actually, they'll tell you very much. I really don't care if I don't care. So you care, I don't. If somebody goes up, I like wrestling, all right? And they do this. And here's a man running to be the leader and the top guy, and he did this.
All right,
what?
So now he won. Primary. Did he reach out to Nora, Lee, Heller, Gilbert to say, hey, let's all get together, let's unite? Did he do that? I bet you he didn't do that.
I don't know who he did it with, but I know, like all of them, I know of a couple that have told me he did, and vice versa. And I don't know beyond
and let's switch gears.
But he's not going to reach out to Gilbert. Gilbert's been burning a bridge.
Let's switch gears a little because of time. How does Adam Laxalt campaign with this guy when Lombardo was against Laxalt and for Sisolak? It does not make.
It does make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
Let me tell you why it makes sense. It would show the urgent nature of the problem we're trying to solve. We must defeat the Democrats. So all that shit aside, right? And Adam would likely have an opinion about what you pointed out. He'd likely have a very strong opinion. And yet it's urgent that we beat these other guys. And frankly, if we don't have going in the same direction going on, and there's always tension, by the way, these are like big personality people, right? You don't get a shrinking flower to go run for an office like this.
And I'm going to say this because these are things that don't make sense to me. With the U.S. Senate campaign, why would the party push Laxalt to run against Catherine Cortez Masto, who's a more stronger opponent, and he couldn't even beat Sisolak?
The party did not. Period.
Really?
Well, 100%. He was on the state convention.
Yeah, he was on that state convention.
Alongside Sam. Both of them were on there. Are you guys saying that the guy that raised as much as Sam should and was a previous elected official shouldn't have been recommended for an endorsement from the body? Of course he should have. So, I disagree. Now, who was pointing or pushing him to run? Yeah, it was in the Trump circles. And actually, it was interesting. I had a conversation with Adam.
So this was already been predetermined before we even got to the endorsement of Laxalt by Trump.
Yeah, that's a long process. It is. But I'll tell you this. And by the way, God bless anyone who can penetrate that and get it done. It's not easy.
I like to bet you.
All right, let's do it. First of all, let me just say though, you can't. You have to let me make some points first,
you know,
Mister.
This isn't all.
Romania is calling. It's important that I make this point. Romania is.
We need to get off the live before you guys make a bet.
You are the county chairman, so this is mostly up to you. I'm going to stay out. Okay,
right. You better come to these events. And
I'll come to the events, but I would bet you $5,000.
Monopoly money?
That Laxalt and Gillespie won't win.
Lombardo.
I mean, I'm Lombardo. Gillespie. Sorry, Doug.
So you're putting me on the spot so that as party chair, I have to accept your bet or I look like a shithead?
No, you don't. You don't have to accept
I know. You get off the live first.
You don't have to accept the bet. I don't think neither one.
No, I think that you put me in a position where if I don't accept the bet, you're going to put out this. Even the party chair is not confident.
No,
you know what though?
I would not do that to you.
You wouldn't?
No.
But you've already done it to me because everyone is coming.
You can lower it if you want.
I have all the confidence in the world.
Because I think this is what I'm thinking.
Okay, but I'm just saying I have all the confidence in the world that Lombardo and Laxalt are winning in the fall.
This is my thinking. I think that both of those guys were put in so the Democrats could stay in power.
Is there an element of the Democrat trying to intervene in our elections since before Sandoval? 100%. And do I agree that they wanted to promote a candidate in the governor's race and other races, including state senate, Secretary of State, Attorney General, State Assembly? Yeah, they did intervene. Was that candidate Joe Lombardo? Mm-mm. That candidate was Joey Gilbert. The Democrats were supportive of his win because they, keep in mind, this idea that there's an establishmentarian party, I don't disagree with. But the Democrat Party wants to maintain control of the governor's mansion, full stop. They're not two sides of the same coin because the Republican Party will own the governor's mansion, not the Democrats. And that's what they're really talking about here. And they didn't want a person who likely would appeal to those nonpartisans because he talks about things in ways that they can understand. And Joey Gilbert, this is what I told him. I said, you are absolutely killing it with your message. Like, it's resonating. People are so excited. Can we convert how you speak while maintaining what you were saying so that people who are not familiar with frontline doctors or issues you discuss won't be confused? Voter confusion prevents them from saying yes. And that's what I think was missing for Joey, that he just couldn't do the cross appeal. You said, how could you guys have nominated this guy through the primary? How many voters voted for Joe Lombardo? And what was the reason that they voted? It was because he communicated with them in a way that they had confidence that he could win. A good example is somebody who works on my teeth, old family friend, best friends with my parents, Mormon, good guy. He's actually a member of the party. I love the man. He's very conservative, super Tea Party, right? And he had some disagreements with Lombardo during the primary. He was a Gilbert guy. I kind of like this Gilbert guy. And I said, so what are you going to do? I'm going to vote for Lombardo. Why? Because we need to beat that Sisolak, and that's the most important thing to me. And I actually have confidence that because he's been on the ballot and he served, he's going to do this. If that's how that man thinks, how many other people were experiencing the same thought process? And if we get too angry and cynical as people who only got to 25% and came in second, we're not going to learn at what we did really well compared to what we didn't do well enough. And we have to learn that part so that we don't have to get through people who aren't going to honor our party's values anymore. Like, I need that information myself. Do you think I like doing this for 15 years and having to take it on the chin with a couple of bad races every cycle? Don't like that. If I've given up time and treasure that I'll never get back with my children, then I better be absorbing this information so that I can actually get my way one of these times. And I think that the Gilbert guys did so much better, especially as newbies. This was an amazing time that I think that they can build off of, but they won't build off of it if they continue to alienate their natural allies, not me, the normal voters who actually are pissed off. Republican women groups in Reno really pissed off at Joey and Joey's supporters, and they voted for Joey.
And
But
he has twice or three times as many that support him that are.
my point is this: these were his supporters now angry at him because the bigger prize was defeating Sisolak. What the Joey group is currently doing is alienating the people that voted for him. I'm just letting you know.
But if you have a mountain of evidence like you did back in 2020 from the Trump team, and you're told to just go sit down and
shut up,
you don't get to bring it forward, just like you're saying with the Gilbert camp. They have all of this data. In fact, according to them, it's way more than way more factual. They have a lot different kinds of evidence that the Trump team didn't have and didn't bring forward. So to shut them off, though, and
Who's shutting them off?
I'm just saying for this one side or this one side to say, you know what, there's nothing there. We need to let that play out.
And plus,
I'm good with that, but I'm going to make a prediction that they don't have anything more robust than I have, but that is not me shutting them down. That is my prediction. And I've heard our state chairman say, what do you want me to tell them? They have the right to do this, which I respect, actually.
And plus, he put almost $200,000 for a recount, knowing damn well it wasn't going to change a damn thing, but just to go through the process. I mean, anybody that put that much money down for a recount, you got to wonder what's going on. You really do.
I actually do wonder what's going on.
He's willing to fight for it. He's willing, and he's doing not only, this is what they've said, not only for him and he's doing it for Nevadans. He's doing it for America. It's not about him. It's about our election system.
Well, I said it earlier, and I mean this very clearly. The issue as you describe it is appropriate and must be pursued. And what they're doing, unfortunately, is mixing in Joe Lombardo as though Joe has literally anything to do with it. And they're being so negative about it that they've alienated me and plenty of other people to say, take a hike, because all you're doing is harming our chances with Sisolak. Not your contest, not your evidence, none of that. Because that fixes a system, but going after Joe.
Well, I believe and this is my opinion, I believe it's because votes were taken from Heller, according to them and their evidence and their data, was taken from Heller, Guinora, Gilbert, John Lee, funneled to Lombardo. So Lombardo was the person to be elected.
I hope it's more than a theory.
Yeah.
Because I hate it when people claim stuff without anything to back it up. I hate it.
I think that's why Lombardo, though, is the target, so to speak, and why that backlash is coming. Because
and
these votes were taken.
For me, though.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is if they're willing to do something that makes my job that much harder with uniting the base, see, words have power. And I'm not saying you don't know that. You know that.
Right.
For them to actually make these accusations and say he's a bad cop or something, you know how effed up that is? Because those words to your peers makes them now think that. And now what? We have to unwind it. It's dirty and gross that they would go there when what you're talking about is a valid thing to do. Yeah. And like, actually, Michael's a lot nicer than me on this issue. I hear him, he goes, gosh, I just wish they'd stop mixing the Joe Lombardo. I'm like, I'm getting a tattoo on my face. Like, because I need to beat the Democrats, guys. Yeah. So, I respected every question here in terms of, my attitude toward your willingness to, and I appreciate your position. You've got members, you've got viewers who actually need these answers because they're confused. Mm-hmm. And I'm saying the best answer I can give all of them is let's prioritize what we must, and that is defeating the Democrat socialists, because it's the Democrat socialists that are taking us off the cliff. Do I want Republicans to do more than just slow it down? Of course I do. But it's the Democrat socialists who are responsible for all of these problems with education, which have led to crime, economic issues, which have led to crime. And now my kids, I got to go drive 2 hours to go see them. It's not anymore living, down the street, going to the park every day.
Oh, don't feel bad. They did a zone variance when I live 2 blocks away from Arborview High School, right? And they want my daughter to get on the bus and go another few miles to go to Shadow Ridge, which doesn't make damn sense to me.
Right.
But this is the world we live in.
Sure.
We put stupid people in office and then expect a positive result, mm-hmm. which now we have stupid voters, because if you think like that, you're a stupid voter. Mm-hmm. If you put a stupid person in office to expect a positive result, you're stupid. Mm-hmm. Right?
Well, listen, I've appreciated the time on the show. I'm glad we didn't do this earlier. My brain was fried, but thanks for the accommodation for my son. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And this isn't at all to attack you.
I didn't feel
McDonald.
That.
I mean, it's not.
I didn't feel that from you.
No. The point is
when I attack.
Yeah, I know. I was like looking for a shield.
The point is somehow, and yeah, the voters, the viewers, anyone who's listening, the point is to bring it up and talk about it. It's an elephant in the room. We're all going to the same events together. We're all on the same team. We need to unite. We need to get it together because we need to defeat the Democrats. You're totally right. But in order to do that, we need some answers from everybody, the people at the top, from Lombardo himself. I think it would be wise of his campaign for him to come out and actually talk to the voters and be more present and to address some of these specific things so people can hear him. Because when you relate and you're personable with people and you look them, I'm looking at you in the eye, we can relate, we can have a conversation, even if we disagree. But I think that's important for him to come out. And if he wants to change some of the views of the base and the voters of our party, I think that would be really wise for him to do. And Laxalt too. So they can't campaign from afar. They need to campaign from within. And we're the party, we're the voters, we're the people, we're there. We all go to the same things and we all support the same ideas and the same thing. But a lot of times they're not there.
Let me ask you a question and then we must go. Yeah. But the question would be, so great, I hold an event, the sheriff comes down, and it's to address things in a respectful manner. And then the audience is far from respectful. Am I really going to be asking to put him in a position like what they just did when the president was in town?
Well,
I'm not doing it.
We asked him twice in a closed setting like this we've had a very respectful conversation, even though we may disagree about certain things, but we've had a very respectful and brought up all kinds of issues. And Joe, he could have the same opportunity and he could reach a lot of viewers just on the internet where this is sent out to and still answer the same things.
Why don't you tell them what Joe said to you about coming on the show?
Well, we were at Ahern at an event and I met Joe for the first time and told him I was going to be a guest co-host for his interview. And he said, well, I told Steve that if he gets adversarial, I'm going to get up and leave. And I said, does that apply to me too? And he said, yes. I said, okay.
And this guy's running for governor. Of course, they're going to be adversarial conversations. But if you don't sit down and address them, they're going to be worse.
Potentially. I would take a different tactic, honestly. More flies with honey than vinegar. That's just my position on it. It doesn't mean I'm
going to give the man
endorsing.
a present if I don't get to talk to him first and find out what's going on.
My point is, I think that there's a way that these discussions can be fostered, and it does begin with the trust that those discussions can remain on a friendly basis. And then you can get to the honesty. Mm-hmm. So you are a hard-charging guy, and the sensitivity on some of the disagreements can be treated more surgically, and then you might get a different response, and you might not. I don't disagree with the need for it, by the way, and I appreciate that the forum would be better received in an interview process, but my point is that I don't want to be bringing in these candidates into a situation that is negative for the end goal going to Sisolak. And so for me, it's like, hey, come talk about, vaccines and things. It's like the base is going to come and just yell at them. I'm not going to do it.
But that's a general overall that the base is going to do this. I think there's a lot less people that would be then. I think the majority would be respectful. We're not animals, right? We want to hear what he has to say. I think the majority, and maybe some people need to be escorted out. But I think for the most part, it would, give him an opportunity to speak and an opportunity to the voters to unite and to come together.
And you would think, coming from an Army veteran such as Joe Lombardo and Adam Laxall, they wouldn't look at me as adversarial. They'll look at me as somebody that's trying to find out what the truth is and sit down and address the issues. And that's all I want to do, is sit down and address the issues. So because I'm bringing up something that's uncomfortable, I'm adversarial?
I think it's more complicated than that. But still, I'm going to be about 5 minutes late to my obligation, right. So I think we need to.
So, Jesse.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on the program.
Hey, you're welcome.
I really appreciate it.
I would not do it for anyone but you and you.
Thank you for coming on.
Because I'm going to ask you next.
Stephanie, thank you for coming on the program. And if you want any final words and close, Mark is going to zoom in on you and go right at it.
In summation,
whatever.
There's one enemy, and that's the Democrat socialists. So we want to state that we are proud of to live in again, because this is my home. Then we better be voting Republican, which means we better be prioritizing what's at stake. And it's real in my life. I'm sure it's real in yours. If there's something that you think you wonder about that you can do that's beneficial to an election in November, just remember this. Typically in an off year, 1 in 3 Republicans don't vote, which means in your own sphere of influence, you have greater control and opportunity to get people out to vote. So if I were you, I would be going out to everyone I know and making sure that they show up. 1 in 3 Republicans don't show up. 100 people, now you've just gotten 30 votes. And you did that with people that you know and love.
And a point of contact if you want to give it.
Sure. theccrp.org. And you can follow me on Twitter. I never plug that. I am Jesse Law, at I am Jesse Law.
Well, thank you again, Jesse Law.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stephanie Phillips. Folks, that's Jesse Law, Clark County Republican Party Chairman. And we were talking about the Nevada governor's race and a little bit of the U.S. Senate race for the GOP. We hope that this show was informative to addressing these issues. And I would like to say that Veterans of Politics is nonpartisan. So we're not strictly Republican. We invite all political parties to come on our program, Democrat, Libertarians, Independent American, because we all live in the state. We all love the state and I would love to hear the other side insights as well, to get some type of feedback. And Joe Lombardo, if you want to come on this program, anytime, any day, 2 a.m, 6 a.m, 10 at night, I will accommodate you. So this is an open invitation to you, Joe, to come on here and talk about the issues and let our viewers know if you really want to win the Republican GOP, if you really want to win the governor's seat, you're going to need everybody to vote for you. So don't be arrogant. Come on the program and let's have a conversation. This is Steve Sanson, Stephanie Phillips with Veterans in Politics. Until next time.